Greetings, curious acolytes of the Force, and welcome back to our archives. Throughout our studies of the Force, both light and dark, there are a few abilities in the spectrum that the Sith aren't very much privy to at all. In fact, it seems as though the Sith actually have a much wider array of Force abilities than that of the Jedi, mostly because they are willing to explore and experiment with the lengths of the Force in order to acquire more power and knowledge. With almost every ability of the light side, there is almost always a dark side version to counter it. We talked about previously on Holocrons how Sith have found out ways to answer life after death by binding their spirits to objects, and how they made up for the dark side's weaknesses by creating dark healing. However, there are yet at least two more light side abilities that the Sith can not only not replicate, but also absolutely hate because of the nature of these abilities. Today, my friends and students, we are going to delve into two of the most powerful light side abilities that are available to the Jedi. Those abilities are Force Binding and Force Light, the two most hated abilities for the Sith in all of Star Wars lore. Fascinating as the Sith's overwhelming power can be, it is certainly enjoyable when we find a few advantages that give the Jedi a leg up on their power-hungry counterparts. Before we get into it though, we sense that many of you attending today have not yet subscribed. Darkness lurks around every corner, my friends, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll always stay prepared to defend yourself against the forces of evil. Now, let us begin. To begin, we'll talk about Force Binding, a power that has recently been introduced in Star Wars canon via the High Republic series. Force Binding is the act of multiple Jedi coming together in one ceremony to combine their power to mute the powers of a dark side artifact. In other words, it gave its users the ability to contain the influence that a Sith artifact had on its surroundings. This was the method that the Jedi used to safely transport dark side objects from one place or another, from within the Jedi Temple or another place for proper destruction or disposal. In my opinion, this ability is pretty huge. Artifacts of the dark side and of the ancient Sith were extremely important, and we have talked about some of the most dangerous artifacts many times on the channel. Often, these artifacts held the very spirits of the ancient Sith, and their dark influence would warp and corrupt their surroundings or even other Force wielders. Force Binding completely takes away the essential function of a Sith artifact by putting the powers under bondage and keeping them in the area of influence limited to only the object itself. Using this power, a few Jedi can ideally even bind the evil spirit of an ancient Sith to an artifact, rendering it pretty much useless. We hear a lot about the dark side tainting entire areas, planets, or corrupting things like kyber crystals in the bleeding process. It is really interesting to hear of the Jedi art of cleansing these effects using the heal crystal method, or with this ability of Force Binding. Of course, binding doesn't exactly cleanse the artifact entirely, only limits its sphere of influence. What does actually do the cleansing function would be the next ability of Force Light, a very powerful and noteworthy Force ability that is quite famous in Legends continuity. It is a tragedy that Force Light is not something that is widely pursued or even taught by the Jedi Order, as it could potentially be the secret weapon to defeating the Sith once and for all, especially if all Jedi knew how to use it. As the name suggests, Force Light is the pure light side ability for one to actually harness the Force in order to produce a massive ball of light, typically in their hand or by manifesting it elsewhere. This light was blinding to all who allied with the darkness, and the entire function of the ability was to purge the surrounding area of all of the dark side. It is said that this ability could temporarily sever a Sith's connection to the dark side itself, like how a Force Scream severs the connection from a Jedi to the light. Force Light could also dispel dark side illusions, and even cleanse people of dark mind control. Furthermore, the ability could also be used to banish Sith spirits. The light essentially made the dark spirits solid to where they could be affected by the physical world, weapons, and their connection to the dark side was significantly weaker. In this way, one could ideally defeat a Sith spirit in the physical realm so long as Force Light was active. In one famous instance, Jedi Master Arca Jeth used Force Light to purge a planet of the dark side energies, permitting from Friedan Nad's sarcophagus, one of the most famous uses of the power. In another grand display of Force Light power, Jedi Master Thrawn managed to use both Force Light as well as Force Binding to purge the entire system of Ambria completely of the dark side, doing so by trapping all of the dark side spirits that plague the planet into one single body of water, then naming the body Lake Nath. After this, the formerly desolate world began growing lush and green with flora yet again. Other practitioners of Force Light include Master Yaddle, Nomi Sunrider, Jason Solo, and of course obviously Grand Master Luke Skywalker. Luke had used Force Light when in the battle against the dark side demon Abeloth. The wicked creature had Luke subdued in her tentacles and would have completely killed him. However, Luke drew upon the compassion he had for the entire galaxy, and most importantly, the love that he had for his family, friends, and his Jedi Order, the Jedi Praxium. All of the sudden, his entire body was wreathed in pure light, burning and banishing the tentacles around him and driving back Abeloth. Another instance of this happening was when Jacen Solo achieved complete oneness with the Force and was bathed in Force Light while defeating the Supreme Overlord of the Yuzhong Vong. Nomi Sunrider, one of the former Grandmasters of the Jedi Order, was a master of this ability and used it to dissolve all dark side illusions from around her during a battle, and would often use Force Light in conjunction with her battle meditation. As a brief side note though, how absolutely incredible and insane is it that Luke Skywalker was actually able to injure Abeloth, a Force demon with the ability of Force Light and essentially oneness, not to mention how powerful Jacen Solo became with it. Undoubtedly, Force Light is one of the finest abilities ever produced by the Jedi, and as we said, it's quite a shame that it isn't taught widely within the Jedi Order. I do want to make it clear though, that oneness with the Force and Force Light are very different abilities, just like Force Lightning and Force Storm are different abilities. Just how Force Storm is essentially the most powerful and destructive ability that the dark side can offer, oneness with the Force is its counterpart in the light. And while one can use Force Lightning as a common Sith, a Jedi may be able to use a version of Force Light as a common Jedi, but only a select few have ever used Force Storm or oneness with the Force. With using Force Light though, the major problem is that a lightsider has to be pure in their intentions and have a genuine connection with the light side in order to accomplish this feat. Unlike telekinesis, light isn't something that is easily used or mastered. While the fact helps to keep the sanctity of the ability intact, I feel that this power is shamefully underutilized and could honestly be the difference maker in a battle against the forces of the dark side, even Force entities. And that is why the Sith absolutely hated this ability. Sith feed on darkness, and their entire doctrine revolves around the ability that the dark side is completely sovereign within the Force. Just the existence of this ability and the implications of its use flies in the face of everything the Sith believe in and work hard to attain. And if an entity like Abeloth was unable to withstand Force Light and oneness, just imagine how the Sith feel. A Sith of unimaginable power and strength could be reduced to nothing in an instant with a single use of this overpowered light side ability. But anyway, my friends, and acolytes of the Force, what do you think of these two powers? Specifically though, oneness in the Force and Force Light. Would you like to see these used on the big screen in Star Wars lore? And if you were a Jedi, would you go out of your way to pursue acquiring the ability of Banished Darkness from your mere presence? And would you also seek out the ability of Force Light? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. And as always, may the Force be with you, and we hope to see you in the next holocron.